Welcome back. Take 5. Okay. Seriously, this is my 5th time trying to go through this. That's the thing with the one-take video. So your 3 stars of the week in the NHL as we get into another News of the Day video. Of course, this morning's involved the preview as well and some fun stuff looking at playoffs and who might end up with who and that kind of fun stuff. But your 3 stars of the week this week, Austin Matthews is number 1. 4 games, 7 goals, 4 assists, 11 points. Pretty good week for him. John Carlson's the number 2 star, very quietly having a good season. 3 games, 3 goals, 5 assists, 8 points. So when we talk about players who, are in the running for trophies and all that, Carlson not being mentioned for the Norse, and I get it, but when we look back on Carlson's career someday, we'll look at his totals and we'll ask, why didn't he ever win a Norse? Jonathan Huberdeau is the 3rd star of the week in 3 games, 3 goals, 4 assists, and 7 points for Huberdeau. So he continues to have a year which we may see as a career year. We may see this now as being just this is who he is. Maybe he'll be 110 point per season player from here. It'll be interesting to see how it works out next year. And of course, with Florida, it's about what happens in the playoffs. If this is a team that ends up losing in the first round, it'll be remembered for being this great run and all these records they set, and then ultimately they don't get over the hump in the playoffs. But again, we shall see. Plus minus is a very divisive stat. In the hockey community, I will say my view on plus minus is that it can be useful in isolation. It also is a nice introduction to advanced stats, and I'll say why. So plus minus leader right now in the NHL is Johnny Gaudreau. Great season. Nobody's going to argue that he's not having a great season. And Lindholm's number 2. At the bottom, with a minus 41, is Keith Yandle, who of course, when Philadelphia decided to scratch him, there was a lot of discussion, there was a lot of arguments, and this is why I think as a coach, having a guy on your team that has this huge consecutive games played streak going, could be frustrating. And I mean that. Could be frustrating if you want to change your lineup, but there's a guy in the lineup that you're kind of wanting to get out of there because you feel like you want to see some other combinations, but you can't because he's got a big consecutive game streak, which there were rumors about during his final season in Florida as well. But for Yandle, it's been a rough year. Now, this is why I say this is a gateway into your advanced stats. You can then look at why. You can go in and look at Johnny Gaudreau and look at high danger chances for and against. You can look at how he plays with certain teammates. You can look at a lot of these other fun things too. And on the Keith Yandle front, you can look at, well, why? Who has he been paired with? And what's been going on while he's on the ice? What are the high danger chances against and for? So as much as people want to complain and say that plus minus is a terrible stat, I think it can be useful. If a guy in a 5-game series is a plus 8, he played pretty well. He either overcame the challenges put forward by the other team in terms of who they had against him, or maybe he overachieved a little bit. Maybe people underestimated him, right? And if a guy's a minus 8 over a 5-game series, that's a rough series for him. And again, if you have a team where everybody in the lineup is a minus 5 or below, and you've got somebody else that's a plus 10, then you can look at how he's being deployed. Is he being used only in certain situations where he's being protected? Or is he actually making his line mates and teammates better? So plus minus is this big divisive number that I don't think has to be as ridiculed as it is. I think you can look at it as part and parcel of the story. It is not indicative of who the best defensive player in the league is necessarily, but it does tell you who's having a pretty good year, and right now that's Johnny Gaudreau. News out of the Winnipeg Jets from yesterday. So in between the first and second period between Ottawa and Winnipeg, things changed. And apparently the reason being that Coach Dave Lowry kind of let him have it. We of course now look at coaches who do the yelling and screaming and the iron fist kind of thing as being old-fashioned and kind of a throwback. I think there's room for both. I think that it depends on the roster you have. Some players aren't going to take getting shouted at very well. Others do, and in this case, Stastny came out after the game and said it kind of sparked their turnaround. So I think when it's used correctly, I think when it's used every now and then, and just from a parental standpoint, if you're yelling all the time, the kids are going to tune you out. If you yell every now and then, and if they don't know when you might yell, it keeps them a little bit more on their toes. So I think as a coach, I think you kind of have to have that same sort of idea where if a coach is yelling all the time, I think it's easy for players to tune him out. But if it's every now and then, you just let them know this is unacceptable, I think you have a better time of it. All right, Canuck news, and this is going to be tied to their opponents for tomorrow night too. And this is not hugely great news if you're a Canucks fan. Tanner Pearson, upper body injury, unlikely to play this week. Pearson has really turned his game around after a slow start. He's been very good. He's been very consistent. And so losing him for a week, that's tough. While the Canucks have done a good job of, cobbling together new lines and changing things up on the fly. And I think a lot of the credit for that has to go to Bruce Boudreau and the coaching staff around him. Not having Pearson hurts, and not having Besser for tomorrow night hurts as well. He's not playing in tomorrow night's game against Vegas with an upper body injury, but they're hoping he returns during the homestand. Now, he's at the team photos today. There's been a lot of discussion about whether or not he and JT Miller get along, and various other divides in the locker room you hear about. It's funny how when a team's really struggling, you hear a lot about the divides in the locker room. When they're doing well, there's less discussions of a divide in the locker room. I really think that's how that works. When things are going well at work, the guy you really don't like doesn't bother you as much. When work really sucks, the guy who aggravates you all the more. I speak from over 20 years of experience, which now that I work by myself, there's days I just can't stand me. But there are also days that I'm like, hey, good job. So I have to be fair, or else I might quit on myself, and then things just get confusing. So, yeah, I hope Besser comes back sooner rather than later. Hopefully he'll be back for their game on Thursday. But this combined with the news that Mark Stone could very well return tomorrow. He's a game-time decision. He was skating, though, with Pacioretty and Stevenson. Now, I know there's going to be people saying, how does this work under the salary cap? Well, you just make moves. You have to move guys around. You have to use your LTIR. You have to use your minor league system. You have to figure this out. And if you have to play with fewer players than you are supposed to have. Vegas has already proven last year and this year they're willing to do it. They're willing to play with less than a full roster, which again is a punishment. That is absolutely a punishment. Vegas last year, when they had to play with less than a full roster because they were over the cap, they did not have a good record. So Howden, Haig, Brossoit, Carrier not traveling with the team for their game tomorrow and on the road trip in general. So this is a team that their depth is absolutely being tested. But having Stone back, and he was practicing on the first unit power play as well, that is a huge difference maker. I've talked about this too, that the whole LTIR cheating and all this, I guess, but taking Stone out of the lineup is kind of biting your nose off to spite your face. He is their best forward. And I say that knowing how well Jack Eichel can play, Stone is just absolutely fantastic. So if Stone is in the lineup for Vegas tomorrow, even if they have to play with maybe five forwards, that'd be a punishment. 11 forwards and 5 defensemen. Even if they ended up doing that to stay under the salary cap, I think I would prefer that lineup with Stone rather than the one with 12 forwards and 6 defensemen without him. But of course, I would wish him a speedy recovery starting the day after they play Vancouver because I'm a Canuck fan, but it looks like he's going to end up playing tomorrow, and then we can all have the debate, which we're going to have anyways regarding LTIR and all that. Colorado. So the Avs without some big names, and yet they're still winning games. Landeskog is not skating yet. They're hoping to have him back in time for the playoffs, of course. Huge difference maker without Landeskog. And Kadri. Kadri is on the ice for practice today. There is still no return date set for him, nor for Ryan Murray. Ryan Murray, a defenseman that can be very good, but he also is injury prone. And so for Colorado, they're going to look to get these guys back in time for the playoffs. Of course, for Kadri, it interrupts what was a career year for him. We'll see if he can get back on track once he comes back and how that all works out. So all the best to Kadri and to Landeskog and to the Avs. Toronto news going on with the Maple Leafs. Andre Kasha has a concussion. So again, with a concussion, there's no timeline on his return from that. So that's tough for Toronto fans. And Jack Campbell's not 100%. So Jack Campbell not 100% at this point. That means that against Buffalo tomorrow night, the debut of Owen Power, we're going to see Shalgren starting. The good news is Shalgren's been playing pretty well. So for Toronto, we'll see how that goes. They also will be without Jake Muzzin. Jake Muzzin, apparently it's not related to the injury he returned from, which is either more concerning or less concerning that there might be another injury there. But yeah, Muzzin won't be playing. Kasha's out for a while. It's too bad for Kasha. Much like with Kadri, Kasha was having a really nice year. In Kasha's case, it's not really a career year as much as it just feels like it's a return to form for him. So we'll see how long he's out. Now, if you're a Columbus fan, it looks like Wednesday could be the debut for Kent Johnson in the NHL. So this is good news in that Johnson, viewed by them as, a top 6 forward and he was a really highly looked at draft pick. I remember doing a video on him and everything, and I like everything on his resume. It looks like he's going to be a good NHLer. So the future for Columbus could be on display in Wednesday's game should he make his debut then. Breaking news as well that came out shortly before I post this video. That's why it's different color. It's at the bottom because this is a story I had to read up on. There's a lot to this. So the PHF, the Women's Hockey League, having discussions with the PHWPA, the union that represents a lot of high-profile, bigger name, bigger star power women's hockey players. Those talks have broken off. So there are a number of concerns that cause the union to say, okay, this does not work. Then the big thing seems to be there's no transparency. So the league is not transparent about who's getting paid what and how and where money goes, and they're not willing to give this information to the union, which is information that the NHL provides to the NHLPA. And a lot of sports leagues provide that information. I don't think Major League Baseball does. I think with Major League Baseball, everybody's making a lot of money, and there seems to be some hotly contested items in and around that when it's CBA time. But outside of that, everybody just makes boatloads of money, and they just don't ask too many questions. But ending the discussion, part of it, the first thing they notice is there's no tangible plan. So they're saying that the financial plan for the PHF doesn't work for them, and that the union is overwhelmingly in support of ending this discussion, which also involved Gary Bettman, involved the NHL, and it just did not go anywhere. And they point out that in the finals, if you wanted to go see the Isabel Cup, it was free to get in, and that the MVP of the final ends up getting $1,000 in Dick's Sporting Goods gift cards, which you got to think with a sponsorship deal may not have cost them anything. And again, this goes back to, in my employment history, there were times where we would have maybe a Christmas party or maybe a going away or whatever it was, a party for somebody, and they would give them gift cards. And I would mumble to myself, that cost the company nothing, because you would know about the sponsorships and how all this works. So that is kind of, I don't know, it just feels a little dodgy. You're the best player, and here's Dick's gift cards. What if they don't go to Dick's Sporting Goods? What if that's not, then they got to sell them or whatever? Anyways, also, they were concerned about the affiliation of the league with John Boynton, who's an owner of, I believe it's 2 different teams as well, but he's the chairman of Yandex, co-founder of Yandex, which is Russia's Google. Well, here's the thing, of course. The NHL cutting off all ties with Yandex when the invasion of Ukraine takes place. And so part of what the union's looking at is, with the money coming in from Yandex, right, they're looking at this and saying, how could this affect sponsorships into next season? How is this going to affect the league's view publicly? And how could that then have the effect on salaries, on the growth of the league, and all that other fun stuff, right? So they're just looking at this and saying this is not a good situation, and they weren't getting the answers from the PHF that they wanted. They weren't getting full transparency. They even said, there's a lot of money going into the league. We weren't told how much of that money is actually going to go towards the players. So there's just too many unknowns that they're not happy about. And so while the league has seen a couple of commissioners come and go during this time, it's still not a relationship that works. And now the question becomes, so what does the union do? The plan has always been to start their own league and to try to, have a business plan that works. Well, if they're going to do that, what is the plan? So we'll see what ends up happening. But good reporting from Haley Salvian, who is, of course, on The Athletic, writing for them on this. And she's got a very good article on this that goes into far more details on how this kind of fell apart. And now we don't know what's going to happen next. One other thing that they pointed out, too, was that the union wanted to see a plan from the PHF that would help to attract European women's players to come over and play in North America. And there wasn't really a plan that addressed that. And that's something that they haven't really been able to do with a women's league yet. Have high-profile Europeans come over, then you're raising the talent level of the league, and you also raise the potential for more jobs, more teams, and just that kind of thing. So there's a lot still to be ironed out here, but it sounds like if it gets ironed out, the union, the PHWPA, is going to be on their own, and the PHF on their own as well. We shall see. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.